Hey Curators, welcome back for another episode of the Yarn Curator podcast. My name is Naomi. Welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all things knitting, spinning, and fiber related. Happy 2023 everyone. This is going to be my first episode of the new year and my first episode probably once again in like 2 to 3 months. I had planned on filming in December and then I thought to myself, there's a lot of people doing Vlogmas and I think my episode will just get lost in the sea of Vlogmas. So I opted out of that. As you can see, if you're a returning viewer or you just saw, we did get a second dog over the holidays. That was Evie, who just ran off the couch. Bing Bong, I think, is somewhere where he's not supposed to be, which is the bedroom. So he and she may be periodically appearing on the couch behind me and or lending the voice of their people to today's episode. So yeah, I guess that's what's new. We got a new dog. Like I said, her name is Eve. She's an 8-month-old Australian Shepherd. Someone surrendered her at one of the local shelters, and my husband and I have been debating getting a second dog for a few months now. And we were just kind of waiting for the right one to pop up. We debated getting another collie, which is what Bing Bong is. We've met a few dogs at different shelters, put in a few different applications, all that good stuff. So anyways, when Eve popped up, I actually left on my lunch break and went and got her. And yeah, she's been great. They're settling in really well together. She came from a home that had dogs, so I wasn't really worried about Bing Bong adjusting because he loves other dogs. And so she was really more of the question mark, just not knowing her history or her personality, as well as we know his, obviously. The other fun thing is that she came home with kennel cough. So we've been dealing with an upper respiratory infection, but it does seem to be finally clearing up, which is great. So yeah, that's her in the background. Let's see if I can put the focus on her for a little bit. Evie. Hi, show the people your face, sweet girl. Yeah? Since it has been so stinking long since I have recorded, I have mostly finished objects, and I may or may not show one whip. It depends on how long I prattle around. So the last time that I filmed, I think, was back in November, and my mojo is just kind of all over the place. So all I've been doing really until the last month or so is just knocking out whips. So today's episode is going to be a lot of finished objects. So the first lingering whip I decided to focus on was my Waffle cardigan. And this is a pattern, I believe, by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which might be Pernell Larson. I think that's right. So I cast this on in the year of 2021. At some point in 2021. And before the end of 2021, I had I remember talking about this in like January of 2022 podcasting and or the end of December. But I had finished the body. All this sweater needed was sleeves. And for most of 2023, she just sat in a project bag in my cabinet that I keep like most of my knitting stuff in. And it's a real shame because this is a beautiful cardigan. I love the yarn that it's made out of. So my sister Zoe, you might want to take a shot every time I say her name. It's like a knitting podcast and a drinking game all in one. But my sister Zoe has her own channel. It's Felicity Yarn Studio, which is also the name of her yarn dyeing business. And so this is knit out of Zoe's yarn. It is out of her superwash fingering weight, like a 75-25, and then it's on the standard silk mohair. Wow, I am out of practice. Anyways, it's in a colorway called Emerald Sapphire. Watch back episodes for the story. I'm not repeating it for longtime viewers again. And so, yeah, the sweater itself features this faux cable design. And it's this all over, as you can see, lace. It's actually a lace pattern in between ribbing, and this faux lace effect is just achieved through knit two togethers and slip knits. So if you've never knit lace before or lace intimidates you, I would definitely recommend this as an easy, like, dip your toes in the water to try lace out. I personally enjoy knitting lace more than cables. I find it less fiddly, but that's with an asterisk because it really depends on the lace pattern and it really depends on the cable. However, like, given the choice, I would pick a simple lace motif like this over a simple cable. Now, that being said, I love the look of cables. I'm just don't necessarily enjoy the process of them as much as something like a simple lace. So this pattern I did some modifications on, and maybe I will make a video standalone for it about all the different things that I changed. But the biggest one is the original version of this sweater calls for it to be knit out of 3 strands silk mohair, lace weight silk mohair. And if you're a knitter on a budget, like most of us are, well, even though I should amend that because I got this yarn through a swap with my sister, but I say that's being thrifty. And so hang on a second, you guys gotta see Mr. Bing Bong over there snoozing. This pattern originally calls for it to be knit out of 3 strands of lace weight silk mohair held together. And I'm sorry, I can't, like, a sweater's quantity of silk weight mohair for me is 3 to 4 skeins to hold it with a garment. And so you multiply that by 3, and I'm sorry, that's just, your girl ain't that ballin'. So the good news is I've knit quite a few projects now over the last few years with mohair, and so I know you can get a very close gauge to that. Holding a fingering weight with the mohair really gets you a nice DK close to worsted weight. You can really kind of push it because the mohair really fluffs out in the pattern. Like, you can really see the halo here. And so because I made that yarn substitution to get almost gauge, my gauge was still a little bit off. I went down a needle size, and then I knew I wanted this to be kind of a closer fitting sweater. So I knit with pretty much no ease in mind when I picked out my pattern size. I don't remember what size I picked out, probably like, oh no, I think I went down a pattern size than I normally would, so that I could get like a nice close fit. That being said, when I wear her, she doesn't close all the way, and I haven't gotten buttons yet, but it will button shut. And I'm not even too bothered by that because, like I said, this is a rib with lace. So like when it needs to stretch, it's got the give built into the stitch pattern. But yeah, I will since I'm sitting on a bar stool right now, and you're on my kitchen counter. So I'll overlay some footage of me wearing this sweater, but I absolutely love it. I love the color of the yarn. I love the pattern. I really enjoyed knitting the sleeves because these were knit in the round. I do have to say, since you knit the body flat, knitting back and forth, it did take my brain a minute to remember like the stitch repeat on the wrong side row because it incorporates purling, but since it's in a rib stitch motif, like that shifts, the knits and purls shift, but it's easy. It just, for me, I'm a little slow sometimes, and so that just took a little bit to click in my brain. On the whole, very pleased with it. It's very warm, it's very cozy. I really enjoy this folded brim. And one of the things I really like about this cardigan, and I think I've complained about this in the past, is that I feel like when you knit a lot of cardigans, like hand knit cardigans in particular, they tend to like do this. I don't know if it's just because when you buy like a mass produced cardigan from the store, they typically have like reinforced serged seams around this area. So I don't know if it's that, but I really like that it just kind of like hangs on my front without really like hanging open. Yeah, the other thing is I didn't knit this super long, like grandpa length. It kind of goes right to my hip, so it almost reminds me a little bit of like a bomber jacket when I'm wearing it, but knit and out of mohair and in lace. Look at that halo. Baby, let me see your halo, halo, halo. I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon, you guys. I know I can't sing for shit. I am now gonna remove this because she's warm. I don't have the air conditioner on. It's Florida, no ceiling fans are running, and I sweat quite easily. So after I finished my waffle cardigan, I decided it was time to buckle down and finish my Great Gingham. This is a pattern by Jessie May that took the knitting socials by storm last spring, winter, late winter, early spring. I believe it was released around March of 2022, and the only reason I remember that is because I bought yarn right around the time it came out. I believe the last time I showed this off on my channel, I had finished the number of recommended or directed pattern repeats for the body. I had my sleeves were knit and I just needed to join it in the round. However, this is the first sweater that I've ever knit from the bottom up, where you then join the sleeves and continue to knit it in the round. And so I wanted to do this on a day at which I was home alone and that I would have the adequate brain space to be able to comprehend the directions as I was reading them without like a lot of distractions, because your girl's got squirrel brain. She gets distracted really easy. And I guess let's go over the deets first. So as I said, this is the Great Gingham, not the Great Raglan. Sounds like the Great Pumpkin Caper, Charlie Brown. The Great Raglan Caper. This is the Great Gingham by Jessie May. I knit mine using Elsebeth Llavold Silky Wool, which is a wool silk nylon blend yarn. And I knitted out of like a monochromatic palette of a light kind of seafoamy green with a darker, more forest green. So yeah, and you guys will notice the colors are on a theme here today. So I did do a little bit of modifying to this pattern. First and foremost, I added 2 extra sleeve repeats to get them to fit my arms. So I think she called for 15 in the pattern and I did 17. And then on the body, this is meant to be written as a cropped pattern, and a repeat ends, like one full repeat is essentially 2 solid blocks, like so one full light block color and then one full dark block. And I believe the potty called for 5 repeats of this color work repeat, so that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so if I would have knit that, that would have been the length of my body, which like that would have just covered the bubbies. And while I like a cropped sweater, I don't want a boob sweater. And so I added either 2 or 3 extra repeats. So let's see, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I added 2 additional repeats to the body as well. I was debating adding a 3rd extra repeat, but I was really worried I was gonna run out of yarn in the lighter contrast color, because when I bought the yarn, I don't know why in my head, I was like, oh, this is CC2. I don't need as much yarn for CC2 as I do for CC1. Obviously you need a little bit more of the first color because that's what your cuffs and this contrast detail along the raglan are knit out of, and this guy. But I mean, the whole sweater is pretty much knit out of the 2 yarns across the body. So I probably should have bought equal amounts of the two. I don't know, I was probably being a cheap ass at the yarn store that day and was like, oh, I don't need that extra skein. That's just for the cuffs and collar and all that other bullshit that'll be covered. You know what I did? I saved myself probably like $10, but I gave myself massive amounts of anxiety while I was knitting this. One of the things I knew was, since I was playing Yarn Chicken, was that I could probably cheat and give myself a little bit of yardage if I played with the rate of raglan decreases. And I'm glad I did, because if I would have followed the raglan decreases as it was written, the depth of my raglan would be a lot longer than it currently is. And once again, because I have knit a lot of sweaters over the years and I've knit a lot of raglans, I know roughly my desired raglan depth, which is right around 9.5 inches from collar to underneath my armpit, is I get the best fit, if that's how long that is. And so yeah, the way the pattern's written is you kind of rapidly decrease to start, and then so like every row you're decreasing for I don't remember how many rows, and then you hit a point where you decrease every other row further up, like closer towards the neck as you're going. And so I think I did a little bit more of the intensive decreasing down here towards the bottom. Then I started to follow the pattern as it was written, and then I was noticing the depth and going, she's gonna be like droopy armpits by the time I'm done. And so then I went back to rapid decreasing along the top. I knit this, I finished this probably late November, early December. So I don't remember where and at what point I started doing those decreases. And much like all things when I do this, I just fudged it as I went. Y'all, your girl fudges. Fudge queen, we remember that. All hail the fudge queen. I'm sorry I don't have better directions on that. I should have written down or taken Ravelry notes, but I couldn't be bothered because I'm lazy. Let's just be honest. Let's be real about it. I was lazy. And yes, I am double fisting coffee and water. And so yeah, after that you knit the collar in a twisted rib, but on the whole, I'm really happy. This hits me right around my true waist. I really like the fit up through the body. And once again, I'll overlay some film footage. And I have been wearing the heck out of this sweater since I finished it, because it's knit out of a fingering weight yarn and because it has that silk content in it. I feel like it's a little bit friendlier to the environment that I live in, which is like, we get cool, colder days, but nothing, on about once, twice a year, we get like a really, really cold slap. We get a really cold snap. And so that's the days when you break out like the nice woolly woos. But for like our fairly mild winters, this yarn has been kind of perfect. The only thing I have to say is that the wool itself is a little bit on the toothy side, which I don't feel like when I hold it in my hand and when I held it in a skein. It almost has like a spongy, really soft, spongy texture. But when I wear it against my skin, it does have just the littlest bit of a prickle. So what I think I might do is the next time I wash it, I'll soak it with a little bit of conditioner. And I've noticed that usually helps kind of tamp down. It helps kind of combat that kind of prickly feeling. The other nice thing is, since it has a relatively high silk content in the yarn, I don't remember the exact ratio, it does not pill a lot. So I have worn this multiple times, and like, just looking at it, there's a little bit of pilling, as you would expect, around like the underarm region, if you can see that right there. So it got a little bit of pilling there. and then just the slightest bit of pilling on the body. On the whole, the sweater itself is not super prone to pilling, which I really appreciate because I have knit other things in the past, maybe out of like a super fine merino or cashmere, like a cashmere blend, and it's just like pill city. And so yeah, I have to say that is a pro for having your woolly wools blended with something else. The last WIP I'm going to share, I have finished one more thing since then, but I think today's episode is going to be long enough. And it also does not fit the color theme that I got going on. Today's episode is brought to you by the color green. Well, this is more blue, but it's got greens in it. So anyways, as if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know I work at a museum, and hence the name of the channel. If you're new here, I work at a museum, and we're I like to say not quite a living history museum. So we're a big park. We're 21 acres. We have 30 historic structures spread throughout the park. A couple are reproductions, and one or two are like new built construction to display different things. But on the whole, most of our houses have been moved from different parts of the county that I live in, and we interpret county history through these houses. So one of our houses is, I don't know why the decision was made in the past for them to do this. I'm not mad at it though, but it is dedicated to telling women's history primarily through traditional textile arts and crafts. So that house has primarily basket weaving demonstrations, but that's mainly because we work with a basket makers group. They're a local nonprofit, and they're not a guild, but they might as well be. Anyways, they man the house the most often, which is why that house most often has basket weaving demonstrations. It is also the home to the Weavers Guild here as well, and they do weaving and spinning and knitting demonstrations when they're in the house as well. So all of that is to say, this house has been one of my projects over 2020, was to refresh the display in there, because previously different rooms in the house were dedicated to different handcrafts. So there was a space for quilters and a space for embroidery for the weavers, and then for the basket makers. And it just kind of looked like someone's craft room. Like the whole house just looked like a disorganized craft room. And so me and my coworkers, we were having the discussion, like, it would be nice to like rein in some of the stuff on display and infuse like a little bit more of a historic home feel back into the space, while still honoring and displaying the work of the people demonstrating in there. So it was a challenge in that, like, it wasn't your traditional historic house display. It's not your traditional like fine art display. It's not like a traditional exhibit that you would think about. So me and our previous curator of education, I managed the artifact collections, had a lot of conversations with the liaisons from these groups about what the display might look like and how can it still be a functional space for them to demonstrate in while still telling the history of this house and the family who built it, yada yada, connecting it to themes of history, making the past relevant to today. So it was a challenge and it continues to be a challenge because I am not done with it yet. I had a little bit of a curveball thrown at me last summer in which we had a hazardous spill in another one of our buildings, and so I kind of had to abandon this house that I was working on like mid-exhibit revamp to go focus on this other space, to completely overhaul it after they ripped out the floor. Half the floor of our historic garage went bye-bye, and I had to completely redesign that and install that exhibit in that space. So I wrapped that project up around November, and I was like, you know what, I'll come back to the Fibre Arts house in the new year when I'm refreshed and ready to go. Wow, that is a long ramble to say. In our Fibre Arts house, we have a Llavold circular sock machine from 1924, I believe, off the top of my head. And one of the goals of this redesign was to get the sock machine up and running. That way the volunteers who demonstrate in there, they can crank and talk about how this would have been a source of income for a lot of women. Anyways, this sock machine has 2 cylinders. It has the 2 original cylinders, and they're made out of a zinc alloy, and they're undergoing what, like a zinc disease. And so the first rule of museums, well, there's a couple rules that all kind of rank equally, but one of the first rules of museums is don't do anything that can't be undone. So like shaving the grooves between these tubes down is not an option. And the second is we take really like conservative, cautious steps towards caring for things. So like, I should say we take really conservative steps towards like doing anything to an item. That's usually like a last resort, modifying it. And that's because we're trying to preserve the thing for as long as possible. Nothing is permanent in this world. However, you can take steps to make them last longer than they normally would within their normal lifespan. And that's where that cautious approach comes into play. And so I didn't love the idea of using these original sock tube cylinders to crank the socks on, because I thought that it would degrade the cylinders faster over time than if they were just left in more of a static state. And so what we ended up doing is I emailed Erlbecker Gerhardt to say, hey, we have like a historic version of one of your sock machines. I work at a museum. We're interested in getting it running. Would a modern cylinder work in the historic housing essentially for the sock machine? And I can't remember his first name, but the owner of the company, whoever, Gerhardt, emailed me back and said there's about a 70 to 80% success rate for putting a modern tube, a modern cylinder into a historic machine. And so we went ahead and purchased a modern tube, and then it got here, and I began the process of trying to figure out how to work it and how to crank it, because since the assembly itself is still historic, I wanted to make sure it could handle the wear and tear of being operated by one of our volunteers. The good news is it can. So I cranked a couple tubes, and so these are my test tube socks. They're riddled with mistakes. So these are made from leftover yarn from Toad Hallow, and this is one of their Princess Bride colors. I don't remember the name of the colorway. I know I bought it at SAF in like 2021, 22, 19. I bought it one year at SAF. I think in 2019. And I adore this colorway. It's the contrast color in my Alden sweater, so that's where the majority of this skein went. And so I had this partial skein of Toad Hallow left over that's just been waiting to be the right thing. And so you can see here is this beautiful bluey green speckle, and it's got speckles of dark blue and purples and some pinks, and I absolutely love it. And then the contrast heels and toes are this blue yarn here, which is the yarns of Richard Gervais. I used to be a subscriber to Post Stitch, I think was the name of the subscription. and they're based out of Fort Myers, Florida, but I bought it when I lived in Colorado. And basically it was like every month you got at least 2 skeins of yarn and a pattern, and this yarn came in that. I knit the project. I disliked the finished project. I frogged it, and now I have this leftover yarn that went into these socks. It's gone into other things as well, but the balls are just sitting in my stash. Anyways, I successfully cranked, most 80% successfully cranked this tube. You'll see why. I officially say I know how to thread the sock machine and like get it started, but and I know what to do to prevent drop stitches. Like I know roughly what needs to be done. Like you gotta have enough tension on it to keep it from slipping off. That being said, when I drop a stitch while cranking, I don't really know how to fix the drop stitch and pick it up and all that good stuff. So I'm sure there are YouTube videos out there on it, but I didn't want to spend too much of my work time necessarily troubleshooting a lot of this. So anyways, you can see here, it got better as it went, but the first, like the start of the tube, which I think was this sock, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but can you see where like there's like dropped stitches in there. And a lot of this I tacked down when I was sewing in my ends, but like here's another spot where you can see like something funky was going on while I cranked it. And that's that, but whatever. You know what? I did it. I think I can show one of our volunteers how to do it, and if they want to go down the rabbit hole of better troubleshooting this, then power to them. Because I have a feeling for the most part, once a tube gets started, it's mostly going to sit on display. It's just sad. It's mainly because when they're in there, more of their time is spent giving the tour versus like getting people to do some hands-on stuff. And I don't want the public using this machine because it will definitely break. So it would have to be a trained volunteer using it. But anyways, I finished my tube. I went in, I picked up the first toe, and by the time I finished ripping out and getting it going, I knit with the toed hollow, and then the last little bit I added in that Richard Gervais and Kitchenered it together. In hindsight, I wish I would have knit the body and then done the whole toe in the contrast color so it matches this one better. But oh well. So yeah, I knit the toe. I'm trying to remember because I knit the toe and then I believe I knit this toe. So I went to the other end, and so then I had a tube with 2 toes at the end. Then I folded it roughly in half. This is what I did. And I picked up each cuff and then I knit each heel. That is what I did. Because I wanted to use the entire length of the tube. I knew I would have enough for 2 socks. I got pretty small feet. So yeah, I knit the toe, split it in half, added the cuffs, and then added in the heels at the end. That is the mental brain work gymnastics that I did to figure this out. But yeah, on the whole, they fit good. They're a little bit large, and as you can tell, I've definitely worn them, and they've gone through the washer and dryer, and I don't mind that they went through the dryer because that helps tighten them up a little bit so they fit a little bit better, because when I wear them they are just a little bit loose, and I think part of that is I probably could get a tighter gauge on the circular sock machine if I knew more what I was doing. But as I said, I didn't want to dedicate too much on the clock work time to figuring this out, because really I just need to be able to explain to someone how to use it. So yeah, those are my test tube socks. So that's it for finished objects. So I believe I mentioned this in my last episode that one of my aunts had asked me to spin her some fiber that she could use to make one of Andrea Mowry's shift patterns. She already had some spin cycle And so she needed a little bit more yardage to do the pattern that she was thinking about. So I finished spinning the first skein that I started January of 2021. And we got together in early December. And so I gave her the first half of the skein, and I had, I'll put in some finished footage of it here. I didn't take that much, so I apologize, because this is what I took to make a reel, not thinking about filming a podcast. Because I was like, oh, I'll have time. I'll sit down and film before I gift it to her. I'll totally have it together to do that. I did not. I almost never do. So anyways, I finished half of the first bobbin for her. And since I'm trying to get that spin cycle effect of a marled and fractal spin, so you kind of get that color changing progression throughout the yarn, throughout the finished yarn as you go. I did a combination of, well, I've divided the fiber in half. And so with the first single, what I did was I broke, when you have a length of fiber, right, you have your long roving. We'll say this is like the length of the roving. Welcome to my acquisition section as well. What I typically will do is I'll kind of break it into thirds to make it more manageable to spin the single. And so what I did was I kind of broke it into chunks, and then within those chunks I then stripped the fiber thinner. So with this single, what I did was, like, on one chunk I might strip it 3 or 4 times, so you get really rapid color changes. And then when I finish that chunk, maybe the next chunk I wouldn't divide it as much, so you'd get these longer runs of color in the single. And then, you know, so I did a mix of that, so it'd be short color changes followed by a long run, followed by short, followed by a long run, followed by short. Not in any scientific method, because that would be far too organized for me. And so that is how this first single was spun, kind of short and long color repeats. The second single, I plan on breaking up the fiber completely and putting together like all the dark blues, all the light blues, all the creams, all the minty greens. And so what I will do is I will spin each color at a time. So the single will be like all blue, all green, all cream, all whatever the next color is, roughly. So that way one single will be those long color repeats followed by the plied with the shorter repeats of this bobbin. So I'd like to sit down and finish that sometime soon, because it was really nice sitting down at my wheel again. So that's that. So anyways, that leads me into acquisitions, none of which I bought. These were all kind of gifts. Well, they're gifts, they're just not Christmas gifts. Let me qualify it with that. So, well, actually one of these is. The first one, this was a Christmas gift, but not in the way you think it is. So 2 years ago, our brother, Peter, gifted Zoe and I yarn for Christmas, as one does. You okay, buddy? You okay? Come here. Shake it out. Poor guy. So our brother Peter gifted Zoe and I each a skein of this sock yarn. It's very Gryffindor. And this was like gifted 2 years ago. Zoe never sent me the yarn, which is fine because her and Cher of the Lathe and Loom podcast worked out a barter or swap between the two of them, in which Cher cranked a bunch of sock tubes for Zoe and Zoe gave her yarn. And so she had her go ahead and crank this yarn from our brother. And so you can see here, this is beautiful garnet and gold. And so this was my tube, which is more than enough socks, or more than enough, like this in and of itself would be enough for like 2 pairs of socks for me. So part of me is like, just done. Finished object. Check. So yeah, at some point I will go in and finish this into a pair of socks for myself, maybe even for my husband, although this might not be big enough for him. I believe it's a 64 stitch tube that she made. And like, if you guys want to compare like the quality of Cher's cranking to the quality of my cranking, feast your eyes on her superior tension gauge, all that good stuff. So Cher cranked these like a year and a half ago. I just now got it, which is fine. It's not a big deal. And so yeah, there's that. I'm sorry, I don't know who the dyer or anything was behind this. Mystery, self-striping, but I'll take it. I also really dislike knitting socks, so it's a miracle that I even finished the test tube socks. It'll be a miracle if these get done, or if it gets Kitchenered into an infinity scarf. Who would like to do the hand finishing for me? You can make me one pair of socks, and maybe you keep the other half of this tube to make yourself a pair of socks. The other acquisition from Zoe specifically is every year I get one of her advent calendars. So since we were together for the holidays, she went ahead and brought me my advent calendar. So I did not actually open it along with Christmas, but that's fine. Or like leading up to the Christmas season, it's fine. I just want the yarn. And honestly, I'm usually so busy in December that in years past when I have purchased advent calendars, I usually forget to open them. And so like I'll open like 5 in a day because I've forgotten to open like a week's worth of days. So this is the main color scheme for this year's advent calendar. It's really pretty. It's got lots of yellows and greens and blues and vibrant oranges. So I'll let you feast your eyes upon this total snack of a skein. And then also all the accompanying minis. I'm not going to show them off individually because ain't nobody got time for that. However, I will hold up a smattering of colors. So these were all inspired by art, different depictions in the style of Art Nouveau. Some of my labels are popping off. Oh no, maybe popping. So you can see here, she made a little custom label for it, but per usual, a lot of my favorite colors show up in here. Blues, pinks, shades of pastels. So yeah, I don't think this year's was a fade. In the past, they've always some were intentionally designed as a fade and some turned out to be a fade. But I don't think this year's I don't think she put that restriction on herself. I'm trying to peek through to see that it's in focus. And then let's get another chunk. So every year when Zoe's dyeing these, I usually receive, like, it's never a surprise for me, her calendar, because I am chief color consultant. But I always forget what they look like by the time I get my calendar, so it's still a surprise, but I give creative input on the process. I think I got the better end of the deal. I get all the joy of it without any of the hard work. So yeah. It's just a really lovely calendar. A little bit more. Couple last handful. So I received that as well. And her calendar usually comes with some little extra goodies. So I got a variety of stitch markers as well, buttons, all that good stuff. So there's that, and like I said, I would really like to attempt weaving one of my calendars. I'm thinking of getting using a super neutral color for the warp, and then the weft would be all the different minis. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Or doing, in my head, you okay, Papa? I think he might be catching Evie's cold. Alternating the warp. So it would be 5 warps of the neutral, say a gray or a black, and then 5 rows of this, a mini, and then the neutral. So you get a stripe for the weft, stripe for the warp, and then but your weft is still these, or you could put in that neutral, go in the weft to make kind of like a gingham, similar effect to this. So that's where my head's at with weaving. I probably MLK holidays coming up, and I think I will take that extra day to warp my loom. And last but not least, my parents are living their best life in their retirement, and they took a big trip up through the Northeast early fall last year. And so my mom has been becoming a connoisseur of yarn shops and mills along their travels. And so they stopped at, she stopped at, I doubt my dad went on the tour with them. But while they were in Maine, they went to Bartlett Yarns, which I believe is a mill in and of their own right. And so she got us these mini skein packets. And so Zoe and I both requested the greens because they were beautiful and yummy. And so here you can see them. And one of the things I love about milled yarn like this is the color you get is really complex, because you can really see how they've blended the fiber in different shades of the dye to create one color. And so yeah, you just get it looks like a simple color from far away, but when you get really close, you can really see the depth of colors that were used to create one shade. And so I think I would like to either make these into a hat or a mitten for our upcoming trip, and or both, hats and mittens, if I can find a nice rustic sport weight yarn to go with these. So yeah, I'm thinking a hat and some mittens, and this would be the color work, the contrast color work within them. So when I made this face, it made me think of what is it, Meeker or Beaker? So yeah, that's that. So I've got a lot of things that I want to make before Iceland and no desire to knit. Well, I have a desire to knit. I just have no inspiration on what to knit. Well, that's a lie. I've got 2 whips on the needles right now. One that I'm primarily working on, one that I'm into. So that is it for the making. So that is it for the making, what I've been working on. If you have stuck in this long, I appreciate you hanging around this long. And until next time, hopefully early February. I'm not making any promises, but I'm hoping to get back on a more regular schedule. I feel like finding routine is coming around the corner again. I love the dogs, don't get me wrong, and I love Bing Bong. He was the first, but getting him has been all of last year was pretty much an adjustment to getting used to a new schedule with him, and getting together with friends and family and all of that good stuff. It was just a giant learning curve. I know you guys can probably hear him chugging water right now. So anyways, yeah, I'm hoping Now with 2, it is a lot easier because they kind of entertain each other. I'm hoping now that we will find a new routine and a new rhythm that I will be recording more regularly and more often. I say this now. It's not even a New Year's resolution. It's just a hope and a prayer at this point. So until next time, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you enjoy whatever it is you're making. I'll talk to you later. Bye.